Fiction, science fiction, horror, fantasy, crime, LGBT, thriller.
You have now entered the House of Mystery with your hosts, Eric Shapiro, David North Martino, John Copenhaver, and Al Warren. Heard on KCAA 106.5 FM Los Angeles,
102.3 FM Riverside,
and 105.0 AM Palm Springs.
Welcome back into the House of Mystery on KCAA 106.5 FM Los Angeles. I'm Al Warren, and I've got Mr. Michael Hawley here. How you doing, Mike?
Great. How you doing, Al?
Oh, I'm surviving. It's been a rough week already, and what is it, only Tuesday?
Yeah, your cold sounds worse. I'm just saying.
Well, I don't know what's going on. Comes and it goes, something going on. Someone put a spell on me. Speaking of spells, we got the Black Magic guy here. So let's he's got a new book called Livewire, and it's not about Motley Crue. Kyle Teucher, thank you for being here.
Sure, you bet. Yeah, I know the other day we were in the car and the song Livewire came on, and there's that awesome riff in it. And I thought, well, if someone gives me 80 mil for the film, maybe we'll use the song somewhere on the end crawl.
That's good.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. You gotta look, 10 moves down the road on that kind of thing.
Always.
But thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. I've, it's just my first published novel at the ripe age that I am these days, and it's exciting to talk about it.
Yeah. I mean, what made you get into writing a novel? Like, why go there now? From all the work you were doing before?
Well, I've always written off and on since I was a kid. I mean, I remember like second and third grade with other kids in school, we were writing stories about the Banana Man and, the cake people, and they'd come down and have these wars because at the time, this is early 70s, Godzilla movies were constantly on KTLA 5 in Los Angeles. And in those days, they'd rerun the same movie all week. So we'd all see the same Godzilla movie and King Ghidorah and War of the Gargantuas and Gamera the Invincible, whatever it was. And so we started writing Godzilla stories, and I got really into it. And I'd start rewriting the Godzilla stories because I couldn't understand why an 8-year-old would have access to the generals. Gamera's a friendly monster. You're 8. You're in a baseball cap. I'm in a field tent. What are you doing here? So I'd rewrite them with more cataclysmic events. And but I was always kind of attracted to that. And then as I got older, I wanted to be the guy in the Godzilla suit or the guy building the miniatures. I thought, wow, that'd be neat. And I had no idea how to ever achieve that. Then Black Sabbath happened to me. And once I heard Volume 4 and I heard what electric guitars could sound like that, it was it all meshed together. They're all related, If you hear music in those early Japanese films, you can listen to it. I mean, tell me those aren't Sabbath riffs. Those big trombones going dong, 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 dong. That's
true.
Full Tony Iommi, right? Except he's not tuned down to C sharp. So I was always kind of just attracted to that whole era of that. When I was a kid, I wanted to be the guy in the Godzilla suit. So in middle portion of my life, I ended up in the VFX trade. And when I was a teenager, I discovered all the rock and roll and the Sabbath and the Floyd and the Zeppelin and then the Ramones and the Pistols and all that stuff came out simultaneously. And so I did that. And then the last thing I did, I circled back to writing stories now that I'm 60.
I made it out alive.
Made it out alive. Yeah, I'm 60 now.
You're talking to two other 60-year-olds. So that's perfect.
Well, look at us all born in Year of the Tiger.
We're the triad.
That's right. Eye of the Pfizer.
Yeah, the old men. Most people listening to won't know any of the bands you named anyway.
No.
I mean, but they won't. You can say Ozzy, and they might because of Sharon Osbourne.
Yeah, because I love Sharon.
Yeah, because of that. And they had that show for a while, right? So he's kind of got a little notoriety. But the most of the other bands, I don't think people really know. I think it's you forget. Time goes by and it kind of these old, when you were watching all those Godzillas and stuff too, you're right. A lot of them are really corny. I never thought about detail.
Yeah.
But that was kind of the style, right? In a sense,
Yeah.
wasn't it just all about, I don't know, just the suspense, the terror. It wasn't like people were just focused on that really phony guy in the suit.
Right.
And everyone running, and it didn't matter that it was stupid. It was okay. It was still good.
Well, it was the only way to achieve shots like that at the time, too. So, you couldn't get scale any other way unless you went with stop motion and miniatures. Well, it was miniatures either way, unless you went with stop motion, but you wouldn't have any motion blur. So it was never going to look right. Ray Harryhausen and Willis O'Brien. Yeah, Willis O'Brien did Kong in the 30s. His protege was Ray Harryhausen, who went on to do the Sinbad films and all that you might remember. So all that stop motion animation, you move the puppet to frame to frame to frame. Yeah. And it looks cool. You can really get down into the rabbit hole with some weird looking creatures, but it'll never look, your eye will know that the motion isn't natural, Yeah. And so those are really the only two ways you could do it until CG came along, honestly. Or when Phil Tippett developed Go Motion for Dragon Slayer. So now we're going to go down the VFX rabbit hole if you want to do that. But.
Yeah, that's right.
No, but it's interesting that how that's kind of what people were watching and viewing.
Oh yeah, that's all there was,
and everyone accepted it. You know what I mean? Like, and now it's you see it on Svengoolie or Mystery Science Theater, like they show the old movies, and they kind of make fun of, add things to it, which is kind of cool. But
right, well, that's like looking at Georges Méliès. He was the guy who actually invented double exposure and visual effects and all this stuff back in the late 1800s into the early 20th century. French guy made it. Yeah, you've heard of a movie from 1902 called A Trip to the Moon, where they shoot a projectile into the eye of the man in the moon. That's Georges Méliès. Oh. And someone had to be first, and so, these people laid down this groundwork for everything you see today. So take a look at Frankenstein from 31 or or Bride of Frankenstein from 35, all James Whale's early stuff. Look at the German expressionist stuff in there, from Murnau and, who directed Metropolis? Fritz Lang.
Right.
So you look at those movies, you can see where everything came from.
But then, they had the substance, but because they had the writing, like Frankenstein, Dracula and stuff like that. The books had the substance. They were incredible. They were really
Dracula is a far better novel than Frankenstein. Yes.
Yeah, but it's still pretty incredible. Like I've been listening to it lately too. I kind of really re-listen to some of these, and the writing is fantastic. And I don't know that it's important today. Like in a lot of books.
There's still stuff that's very well written. There's TV stuff that's really well written. Look at, it was a few years ago, but God, look at Deadwood. You can't touch that writing.
Right. Yeah, that was good.
Look at the writing in the first season of True Detective. You can't come near that.
Right.
So there's still, writers that can put out great books, let's look at King as an example. I'm influenced by him. I was reading him when I was young. I read Lovecraft. I read Blatty.
Yeah.
And King and Clive Barker and stuff like that mostly when I was really absorbing, adult horror fiction, after I got out of my Mad Magazine stage.
Right. I'm still
Which is good. I like those.
Oh, God, they were great. The Exorcist Part Mag.
Yeah. Mad and Cracked. I'm still.
Oh, yeah. Is Crack still around?
No, but it was just there at the time in the 70s,
But, I love Don Martin and Argonis and all these guys and probably helped shape my acerbic sense of humor, maybe.
Yeah.
But when I was about 13, I read The Exorcist. And I wasn't allowed to see the movie, of course, but my parents were avid readers. So everything was in the house. And, in those days, they were reading Herman Wouk and Michner and, and that kind of stuff. And, but I read The Exorcist really young, and I didn't know, you could do things like that in a book,
Yeah, it opened up the doors.
Oh, yeah. Oh, bigger in Dallas. And Legion came out a few years later, By then I'd already seen the film, and of course I had, what's his name in mind? Joseph Cotton. Not Joseph Cotton. Who played Kinderman in the film? I can't remember.
To remember stuff like that.
Yeah. But anyway, it was George C. Scott because that actor was dead. So George C. Scott played him in Legion, played him in the sequel. And it was just, I love the fact that the dialogue was cool. It was snappy. A lot of it was funny because Blatty was actually a comedy writer. He worked with Blake Edwards a lot in the old days. For those of you in the back of the theater, Blake Edwards.
Yeah, Blake. Yeah. Now, Livewire here, your book. Now you talk about black magic and things like that. When you're putting together a book like this, do you take already kind of established sort of magic and everything that's going on in other people's work, or do you create your own? Yeah, like you know what I'm saying? Are you taking established, like, it's like when people have, a vampire in their book, are they taking the kind of the normal of what people generally think, the cross and the sun and all that stuff? Or are you going on your own when you create this sort of a work?
Well, this thing came out of it from a kind of there was an obtuse angle actually to get to the black magic thing. But the idea of black magic meets high tech, what could go wrong? That's the tagline on the back of the book. And when you think about it, who did Arthur C. Clarke say that high technology is indistinguishable from magic? So what it is this story's kind of complex, but you don't see people in a ritual doing ooga booga in robes with swords and speaking Latin with a teenager tied to a submarine or whatever it is. I mean, there's none of that. Oh. But it is heavily implied that there is a serious occult thing going on simultaneous to a very large high-tech operation at the Very Large Array, which is a real thing, which is an array of radio telescopes in Socorro, New Mexico.
Right.
So under the guise that they're trying to perhaps harvest some type of God particle from a CME, which is a coronal mass ejection, when the sun burps out all this plasma. So the science of the tech in it is a little wacky and everything, but it's the idea is to be in the story so hard that you're not going to sit here and go to some physics book and look things up, right? And so, but it's heavily implied that our people in our book can see something going on in this black tent that's adjacent to the control room where this thing at a radio observatory is going on. A storm suddenly appears out of nowhere. A cyclonic storm, almost like a hurricane or a cyclone in the middle of the desert, which is, of course, physically impossible because those have to form over water, and then we're off to the races. And so basically to not give away too much, there's something is certainly summoned through this. And when it all gets terribly out of control, they, in a panic, they try to pull the plug on Skynet. Right.
When in doubt, unplug.
When in doubt, just unplug and run.
Well, I like the name of Medusa Engineering Corporation. That sounds pretty perfect.
Medusa Engineering is a cover for the Medusa cult, and so that's also explained in there too. But I don't want to give away too much because I just did. And
does everyone die at the end? How's that?
There's some bloodletting. But there's AC-130 Spectre gunships. There's huge auto crashes, but one of the focal points of the action in the book is that this, let's say, entity or force that is summoned through the VLA, when they try to pull the plug, it escapes, and the only thing available to it, and that happens to be an electrical substation 4 or 5 miles down the road. So basically, this thing ends up in the power grid. And part of that, as this energy or entity is expanding, the high tension towers along the road uproot themselves and begin to move. So if you've ever been in these, on these highways, you see these 100-foot electrical transmission towers. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So imagine those things on the march, and wackiness ensues.
How about that Ken Lightfeather? Is he going to be shooting that 44 all over the place?
Well, don't show a gun and not pull it.
True.
And Ken Lightfeather is he's a Native American trucker who is friends with Otis Thompson, our proprietor of our gas station, where we find this conglomeration of people who have to pull off the road because the storm summoned by the experiment is so severe that they have to get off the road. And then, of course, they find themselves surrounded by marauding towers. And it's, there's no internet, there's no cell phones, the power's out, you are cut off. On top of compounding that issue is that the because this thing is in the electrical grid, within the electrical grid, it also emits something called the signal. And if you are susceptible to it, because this entity is of a malevolent nature, it gets inside you, roots around like a giant in your sock drawer, harvesting your guilt and your shame. And so you get to relive all that.
Wonderful.
And,
So, what do you want people to get out of the book? Like when you put this together, are you looking at pure entertainment, satire, fun?
Yes. Pure entertainment. I mean, it should just be kind of a fun. There's some humor in it. It isn't a pants down wacky ride, but I think there should be moments in it of tension, of scale, large scale action. And there's hopefully some comic moments in there as well. I mean, it's not pratfalls and clown cars, but, although that would be funny, it's just a high entertainment thing. If you think there's social commentary in it, well, I guess that's up to you. I'm not trying to preach to anybody. I want you to read 80,000 words and have a great time with it. And I want a movie to be playing in your head,
like an AC-130 blasting everything.
Yeah, I think you should see it in a nice 240 with a nice tobacco grad on it for the day scenes. Imagine if Tony Scott shot this. And that's the goal, really. It's just to be entertained by it. So when you put it down and go, that was wild. Hopefully while you are reading it, you'll be able to, you'll want to turn the page and find out where we're going. So with Medusa Engineering Corporation, there's also a very bad cat involved in that. With him too, and by the name of Armin Jenks. Now, this whole thing, what they're up to here, is a thread that permeates all my fiction. This Medusa Engineering, the Medusa cult, sometimes this Jenks guy appears. So there's a bunch of recurring things that weave through it. But Livewire is a great primer to get you into the whole fictional world that comes with it.
Oh, okay.
When you were writing this, were you how did you attack this? Like, how did you start it with characters, or was it the idea and then you placed characters into it?
Yeah.
Is that kind of how it went? Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of what if, it originally started as a short story about 1985 or 6. We were on the road. My band was on the road and I was a kid and we're going through the desert. I was 24 or whatever. And, I was looking at all the high tension towers. I go, God, imagine those things walking around, and just being trapped somewhere and being gripped by that. And so when we got home, I wrote the first time I wrote the story, wrote it a couple times. In the early 90s, I think I cracked it open again and started adding different components. Well, why is it happening? What else could be going on? Is there sinister intent? And so the bones of that second version ended up being the template for expanding it into a novel. When I'd lived longer, for one, I was 35 years older. And I'd lived longer, so it was a lot easier to write coherent people. And I had all the time in the world because it was during everybody was in the middle of COVID hysteria, and I had nothing but time.
Yeah, I guess that sort of helps. It's the perfect mood setting too, right?
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, if you like women screaming at you in the grocery store, I guess. But
it was, it's tension, right? It's about the feeling, the emotion.
There you are.
It's great. I'd prior to sitting down and writing Livewire, I wrote a novel before that. So with all this time that we had off, I just finished 19 months on Top Gun Maverick. I was going to take a couple months off anyway. All this started to go down. I said, I got nothing but time, right? There's helicopter money falling out of the sky. Plus everything was fine anyway. So I just sat out there. Humidor was full and just, started going at it and wrote 3 drafts started sending those to beta readers, got a little feedback, then hired an editor and did the whole thing, properly because I'd never published a novel before and I had no idea how to go about doing it. But luckily, Crystal Lake Publishing, who is putting out this book, they're a publisher located in South Africa. They were publishing my short stuff on this Patreon series they have, which a lot of those stories also tie into the entire mythos that's carried through Livewire.
How do you come up with your characters? How do you create them? Like, do you have? It's quite a bit different than writing something like a movie, like script writing.
Well, I guess, I mean, with script writing is, it's, there's kind of an LCD going. It's kind of a lowest common denominator, I think, going in some of that, if you've read scripts, but just that kind of, that style, that kind of prose has always kind of been easy for me. And if you've lived long enough, you just know how people talk, how they, what they do in between sentences, facial tics, just, I don't know. It kind of just comes.
Yeah.
I don't sit there and whinge about, well, how would unless I'm in the rewrite stage, well, would a 12-year-old say that? Those kind of things. And sometimes I usually overwrite, of course, in the first drafts. I'll be, there'll be 3 adjectives in a row, and when I swing back through, I'm going to have to pick one. That kind of thing, and excising prepositional phrases and cutting out the adverbs and consolidating and all that. That stuff's actually fun,
Well, Kyle, you have a lot of, as you said, a lot of science in there, so you must have done a lot of research as well.
I have the IQ of a dishwasher, and I don't mean a guy who washes dishes in a restaurant. I mean a Frigidaire dishwasher. If it sounds plausible, I'm not Jim Cameron. I'm not going to go, do 18 years of research before I, and plus I don't have the money. I guess I kind of like tech stuff and science, and that's fine. But it's as long as it seems plausible, right? And Tom Clancy said, real life doesn't have to make sense, but fiction does. And, he wrote huge, expansive books about military and all this stuff. I mean, he was researched up the wazoo, So, again, I just want it to sound plausible. Could it happen? I mean, sure, yes, I know where the VLA is, and yes, there's a solar observatory down the road, and there's a town called Magdalena nearby. Sure. There was a level of research in that, but I didn't, start calling astronomers and, why would you use a radio telescope to look at the sun? It doesn't even make sense, but it works in the context of the story.
Yeah.
Perhaps I shouldn't have said that.
Well, no. Well, I mean, you'll hear about it, right? I mean, nowadays it's easy to get.
Oh, there'll be someone on the internet going, clearly as, it's like a Star Trek nerd getting all under the hood if you,
because there's been kind of a surge, I know, in the last year, a couple of years maybe, about the hard science fiction people, and they're real extreme and pretty serious too. When you interview them, they're so detailed. And
I've never read any really super hard like cyberpunk or hard science fiction and stuff. This thing, like LiveWire, would have my elevator pitch, or just if someone says, "What's your book about?" I'll tell them, I'll go, imagine Stephen King and Michael Crichton on a lunchtime bender. And this is what they came up with.
Well, yeah. And it wasn't only that, the hard science fiction, there's a point where it's too much information too, right?
Yes.
It starts to read like a book, like a science book. Like and you asked earlier what the goal is. It's just to be a cool story to read where extremely crazy, outrageous things happen. And we go through it together to the very end, Yeah. And so, who in your life did you kill off in the book?
Pardon me?
Who do you know in your life that you actually put in the book and had them tortured or killed?
Oh, I'm actually normal. I don't do that.
Oh, come on.
So, yeah. And I'm not working out my rage. I'm not doing any of that. But there's a lot of part of the thing that is in the book that these people are grappling with, which is something that a lot of people do grapple with as they get older, is that these hard feelings that are harvested in them from the signal are about their shattered relationships with their spouses or their wives or their children or whomever, because that's what really matters in life, is your relationships with everybody else, because that's where most what's the word I'm looking for? That's where more self-doubt occurs, right? It's just because it's based on it's all relationship based. So that is the crux of the thing that's torturing these people while they're in the middle of this absolutely impossible situation, And so in the middle of all that, it's like someone nagging you about taking the trash out while there's a gunfight going on in your driveway,
Yeah. Well, it's important. Take the trash out.
Yeah. Yeah. But, there's live fire on the driveway. Sorry, honey.
Well, watch smell the cat out when it's done.
Yeah. Either that or, you it'd be a shame to have to, bring a scattergun just to take the trash out in the night. So in those things, there's not, buried malevolence or anything like that. But, there's a little piece of every author, I think, in every character.
You've got to be in it. You yourself will be part of all the characters in a sense.
Sure. Well, yeah. I mean, one of the characters is he's a guitar player whose band got torpedoed by a bad power ballad. So he and his son are headed off to Austin to start a new life. And of course, the desert has other plans.
Is that Pale Brody?
Pale Brody, yes.
Okay.
Is his name. And so he was in a successful, kind of semi-successful hair band. And they put out a power ballad that just destroyed him. And so that's kind of his backstory. So he's kind of dealing with that. And but at the same time, his marriage went into cardiac arrest. He thinks it's from the fact that he couldn't provide the rock star life and the jet set and all that, and that she was vapid and she left him for it. But of course, we find perhaps that is not the case, and which is directly related to his son. So there's a lot under the hood with all the characters in the midst of all this absolute huge scale chaos that's going on around them. So it's the macro and the micro together like that, so with kind of a little sci-fi boost behind it. So
what's your plan with this? Do you want to go into a whole series of books?
I don't know if enough people live through the book for that, but
it's always easy to bring it back,
That's right.
Or nowadays, to write the prequel, it's some.
Oh yeah. Well, actually, there have been a couple of prequel stories on for Crystal Lake's Patreon thing. I wrote setup stories of getting people to where they are in the story. But the whole thread of Medusa Engineering and what their ultimate goal is in the world is explored in a lot of other things that I have. A couple of which are published, some of which are not. And because I've only been at this for a couple of years, taking it as seriously as I am now. So there's 1.5 million words of stuff crammed onto this hard drive. So I'd love to see this take off. I mean, is it going to be the next, Avatar? Probably not. But it'd be nice to have some visibility, have people get behind it, And since I've been a visual effects artist for a long time, I was on the Battlestar Galactica team for 10 years. I was all part of Firefly and Serenity, Star Trek Voyager. Like I said, I did 19 months on Maverick, part of the previs team. We set up the flight sequences in CG before they flew them. Then we did the post-viz, and we did the first whack of all the visual effects shots to make sure they looked good enough for screenings. But I've been around action sequences. I've been around things that fly and things blowing up and all that for a long time. And I think that kind of helped with the pacing and the intensity of the action sequences in the book too.
Yeah, I would imagine that's got a big influence in how you write it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm shooting it while I'm writing it too. I can see it. But it's not written like a movie script at all.
All right, so you're not doing a screenplay as well, or are you going to?
Oh, look, if somebody optioned it and asked me to do it, you bet I'd do it. Absolutely. I'd post up in some room somewhere, and I'd love to do it. But I can't invest the months in that right now while I have other things going.
Yeah. What do you like better, short stories or doing the full book? Which
it's Livewire started originally as like a 25-page story, and as this version of it kept growing, once I got past about 40,000 words, I thought, well, I guess we're going to be a novel, and I didn't really know how long it was going to be because I was going into so much more detail with characters and, expanding some of the incidents, of course, too. And short stuff's fine, but I find that I'm better with things that are longer. It's as you can tell by this rambling conversation, it's harder for me to be concise.
Yeah, well, I mean, the short stories, you have to get the main points of the characters across in fewer words.
Oh yeah.
Like a
friend of mine described it as, a novel is a train trip, where you're sitting in the car and looking at the countryside and letting it all unfold. Short stories being in the express train, trying to get from 33rd Street to 58th. It's just nothing but trip, nothing but story. And that's a cool discipline, and it is fun to do, and I do like doing it, and because you can pack a lot into it if you do it correctly. And there are people who are masterful at it, Maybe we'll get there one day.
Did your beta readers really help you out?
They do. In fact, a couple of them are writers, so I got the kind of the forensic input too, which was great. And other people are people I've known 30 years. Oh, that was great. That was cool. And all that's nice, but they would ask me, well, how come this character, I don't get what happened here. I need to hear that,
Right.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, maybe he should be doing A, B, or C instead, so I'll take that and I'll take that to heart when I rewrite it. And then of course, once it gets to an editor and you start getting really forensic with it to the point of a line edit and notes in the margins and the whole thing. And
yeah.
Right.
You hire somebody experienced.
I remember the editor told me when I was writing one of my fiction novels that I head hop too much, as in I'm going to the point of view of too many people, and it kind of gets the reader exhausted. So instead of so I just had to reduce those numbers. So
I do some of that in this book. I know that, and there's there's one particular scene in it where everybody's being affected by this signal at the same time. And I go, I can't jump in from head to head. I have to put them in little subsections, because even I got confused, and I wrote the bloody thing. And, but that's why you go through 4 drafts and a polish or whatever it takes. Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And,
what makes a good book to you? Like what is a good book to you?
To me, a good book is when I'm reading it and, I find myself nodding off and I go, oh God, I got to get through this page. Or you're reading and go, oh my God, I just blew through 45 pages and I didn't even realize it. That's when you know it's smooth and it's effortless. That's a good writer and a good editor, and just working together. It's really good. It's great storytelling. A good movie's the same way, right?
Oh yeah.
A lot of people bashed on like Return of the King or whatever for being 3.5 hours. But I actually thought the extended version was better. It didn't feel that long, but I just thought it was great storytelling. And
it's kind of like reading the book, because the book is so long, but that's why I like the book, because it got into so much cool detail that the movies couldn't do.
Yeah. And, there's stuff in the Tolkien stuff I just couldn't get through. I don't know. I'm just not wired for it, and I just couldn't get through it. I could never get through Dune either. But
I like Dune 1, but the rest of them I didn't like. Just the first one.
Did you read the Hyperion stuff? Did you read Dan Simmons' Hyperion books?
No. Same
way?
way?
Man. Oh, first one is so good.
Ooh.
And there's Hyperion, Fall of Hyperion, Endymion, and I think The Rise of Endymion. And,
so I'm gonna read Livewire first and then go to the Hyperion.
Okay, you're more than welcome to read Livewire first. And you can do, in fact, you could do readings and interpretive dance simultaneously.
Well, there you go.
On. You could do. I'm an AC-130 Spectre gunship. Hear me roar. I'm empowered. What makes a good book to me is I love the fact if I find out things I didn't know, because if it's a real research author, that's great. I just like a really well done story where I get lost in it and I lose track of time. That's when I know it's really good.
Yeah.
And anything's like that. Anything that is superior is like that. You ever been to dinner with someone and you're running your mouth for 3.5 hours and you have a $280 bar tab?
They did it. That worked.
Yeah. That means, wow, I guess we were onto something, right?
So where do you see stuff going now? Like, what's going to happen? I mean, you don't know how it'll go, but what are you doing now? Are you working on something else, or are you just...
I am right now. I'm doing so before Livewire comes out, I did a novella called Life Returns. Now, the band I was in called Dr. No was a kind of a punk rock metal hybrid thing. And we had a tune called Life Returns that had kind of a supernatural theme in it. Revenge from the grave, Aunt Mary, Uncle John comes back from the dead and, because Aunt Mary killed him. is kind of the gist of the song. I go, well, what if we take that story as a way to bridge the gap between fans of what I did in my 20s into what I'm doing at 60? So why don't I take this story they're familiar with and wedge it into the same universe I just told you about, in which Livewire takes place, and which takes place in Walpurgis County, which is a very haunted place I've written about extensively. And there's twists and turns, and maybe not exactly the way you think it's presented in the tune. Plus, there's lines from the song, of course, in the prose throughout the thing. And it turned out being like a 75-page novella at the end of it. That went to beta readers and everything, too. And the idea is that a couple weeks before Livewire comes out is going to be a freebie ebook or PDF download from KyleDoucher.com. And hopefully it'll serve as kind of a little, like an intro, like a little, like an appetizer before we go to the main event.
Right.
So the idea is that I'd like to pull fans of the band with me along on this venture in this stage of my life. So why am I writing now? You asked earlier, because I can do this till I'm 85.
Well, there
right?
you go.
Or 90 or however long I got,
Right.
And, everybody gets talents, everyone's issued, as you're waiting to be born, you're standing in line and they hand you out the little scroll that God wrote out for you. Here's your talents. You're a mathematician. You're great at making shoes. You're going to be the best,
Beer drinker.
Yeah, beer drinker.
That's me.
Or geophysicist. Me, make up crazy.
How dare you?
That's what I ended up with. And I've been very, very lucky, very blessed to be able to do that and find ways to make a living at it. I've dug ditches and I've mopped urine. I've done all that stuff, but I've been very fortunate in the back half of my life, especially.
And that's just what you do at home.
Yeah. And that's just hanging out. And that's just hanging out at the 7-Eleven. And drop your Slurpee. I want to mop it up.
Yeah.
And so I've been very fortunate in the back half of my life to be able to do that and to be able to use that. And it all kind of converges now. So the music career, the VFXing, what I'm writing now, all of it is kind of in this, this, what is it? The guy in Blazing Saddles,
Yeah.
Cascading down into a pool of creative alternatives. And it's just I feel very fortunate to be able to do that. So the Life Returns ebook, named after the song of the same name, is a full-on horror story. And no weird science or anything like that, but it's, there's occult stuff in it and all that, and coming back from the dead and homicide and, the spooky house and the whole bit. And that'll be available, I'm hoping, within the next week or so, because I think the ebook 49.
Oh, okay.
And so that'll bridge the gap. Then you'll be ready to go into Livewire after that. So hopefully the fans of the band would like that. And because I think it worked out really well. And you don't have to be a Dr. No fan to dig the story either.
So Livewire is ready April 14th, is it?
April 14th. The pre-order link is already at worldfamousamazon.com, where the world stops for books. And
boy, you've got that one down.
And tampons. And honey, can you give me that new Kyle Toucher book? Oh yeah. Well, wait. You know what? I need some OB Tim.
Yeah.
And so that'll be available there, and Life Returns will be a freebie, and because remember, the first hit's free, right? But you got to pay for the dime bag's free, but you got to pay for the ounce. And that's the idea behind that. So that's April 14th. I don't know what day of the week that is. And I'm really excited about it because I'm as excited about Livewire coming out, or having even, telling Crystal Lake's asking me to publish the book, as I was when we were kids and a record label was interested in our garage band, essentially. It's the same thing. I'm just older, so I don't freak out as much.
Yeah. Well, because it's just timing. You, how have you adapted to the, this whole modern, internet and social media and all that stuff? Are you widely available? Are you all over the place? Or are you kind of hidden?
Well, I have Website's about to go live, and I'm on Twitter under my name, Kyle Tauscher on Twitter. So if anybody's interested in me promoting myself, that's the place to go. And I promote a lot of the other people there that are doing the shallow waters competitions on Crystal Lake, which is everybody who does 1,500 word stories every month on a theme. And there have been some really good writers in there. So we all contribute on that, and that's really fun. Facebook, Who Really Cares? And
well, there's baby boomers on Facebook.
I guess so.
They buy books.
I'm technically one of them. I probably should be more visible there, I suppose. And the thing is, I still have a job that takes 10, 11 hours of my day. So,
well,
a lot of, I'm not sitting there living the life of Riley because I have a novel out. It's still, I'm still on the blocks doing shots of jets and tanks and all that kind of stuff, during the day. So it's, you have to schedule your time, not schedule, but you got to squeeze the time in when you can to write.
Right.
So I get up before dawn, sometimes write in the morning, or stay up late. It depends,
Yeah. Before you mop the urine.
Before I mop urine and, yes. And dig ditches, so I can have a taste of my 20s.
Yeah. Do you have to be in a certain mood when you write, or can you just turn it on? You can just
sometimes it's hard to turn on if you're distracted by other things, if your head's in something else, if you have a complex shot that I've been doing all day or chasing deadlines and stuff, sometimes I get too frazzled. But if I can eke up here at, 8 or 9 o'clock at night and maybe punch out even 90 minutes or 2 hours, even if it's just editing, sometimes after you relax and you can get into it, time just like that, like we were saying about a good book. If you're in your own writing and time really goes by, then you're in the zone.
Right.
I think that's a great indicator of almost anything. If you lose track of time in something, you're in the zone one way or another,
Yeah, right.
I don't care if you're on a sailboat or, driving down Mulholland at a nice set of wheels or whatever it is. There's probably cooks who get like that, and so it can't happen. It's just finding the time and not using it as an excuse that you can't find the time. Right.
Right.
Yeah. It was great during all that COVID nonsense because I could just hours and hours a day. Sometimes I do 2 sessions a day. It's going through a lot of cigars, but it was awesome. And it really helped get the engine restarted.
Right.
So instead of sitting down after not writing anything for 15 years and go, well, I'll do a couple of short stories, I wrote a 105,000 word novel.
Well, that's good. It worked.
Yeah.
It worked.
And then I wrote Livewire after that.
Yeah.
And so that novel's been to an editor, and we're, that's in revision. So hopefully,
Livewire is about 80,000?
And Livewire, I think, I have the manuscript up, is 82.8. Yeah. Okay. So I think, I'm not exactly sure how that's going to translate to, number of pages or whatever, but it's, I think it's just in the pocket for.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe about the length of Misery, maybe something like that.
Yeah. It's a good size. I think it's a good.
Yeah. And first thing out of the gate, I'm not going to slam anybody with, here's 1,000 books of me rambling.
Yeah.
You can listen to this if you want to hear that.
Yeah. Yeah. It gets to be too much.
Yeah. So you keep it short and sweet, keep it action packed, keep it fun, and then when the horror does happen, it's whoa, and you just go on a nice hairy ride together, It's like going on a, it's a roller coaster, but I mean, it's just like going on a really hairy ride together, and then you get out of it and you realize you had a great time. That's the goal.
But it sounds like you also said that there's relationships involved, so anyone that's into that, they're going to get hooked with some of these characters that you have. Yeah,
because there's just, one of the characters is guilt-ridden because his son could have been a baseball star. He talked him into joining the Marines. He ended up getting killed in the Beirut bombing back in 1983. His wife never let him hear the end of that. So,
Of course.
Yeah. So there's that father's knows best moment, and so that's one example of just the severity of the relationship examination that's going on with some of the characters there. But Of course now, because it's also brought forth by the Signal, there's also manifestations of it, in the real world. Gets a little hairy when you start seeing your wife in her coffin while you're in a shed trying to start a generator.
To mop the urine.
Well, probably, yes. Standing next to the Slurpee machine.
Yeah. Well,
the rough nights in a mini mart in New Mexico in 1993.
Well, you never know. Well, Kyle, right. It's certainly been interesting. So now the book will be out the 14th, you said, and of course,
Livewire will be out April 14th, and I hope to have Life Returns. It's a little hard teaser predecessor out, hopefully by the 1st of April. That's the goal.
Fantastic.
And possibly even earlier. And that will be available at kyletoucher.com or kyletoucher.monster, which redirects. And world famous Twitter is just my name, KYLETOUCHER. But Livewire, I thank you guys for giving me the time to babble about it. And I hope it turns out to be a fun sci-fi horror romp that it's intended to be.
I'm sure it is. Yeah.
And keep your eye out for the ice skating dance number in the middle of the book, because it's a nice little break from the tension.
Fantastic.
Oh yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Well, the beauty of writing horror is that the fact that there's really no restrictions, that you can just, it's an open field as long as it's plausible.
Right.
No matter how crazy it gets, as long as it's plausible.
Well, everyone, look for Livewire. Of course, we'll have that up on the website as well, so people can find it with one click. So, Mr. Kyle Voucher.
That's right.
Well, I appreciate it, Kyle. Thanks for being here.
Nice speaking with you, Kyle.
Yeah, great. Thanks, fellas. I really appreciate it, and thanks for taking the time.
You've been listening to the House of Mystery radio show. To find out more about our guests, hosts, or shows, go to www.houseofmystery.com.
Show's over for now.
Was it as good for you as it was for me?
Yeah. Good night.
This has been a production of Something Weird Media.
I'll be back.